Hi everyone. I'm so happy to present our work, Points of Interest from Mapillary Street Level Imagery, a dataset for neighborhood analytic. I am a third year PhD candidate at University College Dublin, and this is a work with my supervisor, Gavin McCarter. Um, in this presentation, I will first provide some context for the study motivation and point of interest in the city. Then I would explain why it is important to talk about POIs and street level imager, and would discuss about the main gap in the current state of the art. Then I would go further and explain the material and dataset that was used for this study, such as the Safegraph and Mapillary, and then the method how we use street view images to extract POIs from street level imagery. And then I would introduce our dataset as part of this research, which is publicly available. And then I would finish this slide by talking about the main finding of this study. Urbanization will increase from 55% in 2018 to 68% in 2050, which result in the development of the POIs in the city. In the whole time of this presentation, whenever I talk about POIs, I mainly focus on any location in the city that people can do their daily activities. It could be a hospital, it could be a restaurant, anywhere that people's daily activity could be happen. Analyzing POIs and their neighborhood is really important because it's one of the main socio-economic studies of the cities. It is important for urban planners to make POI recommendation in cities, real estate appraisal, and also it makes sure the future and future success of augmented reality for autonomous vehicles. There were many definitions of the locations. There was the idea in 1987 by Agnew that was trying to explain POI. So he was believing that each POI has its location that explain it. It also can be explained by its local, which is any physical and cultural things that is attached to a location, and also a sense of place, how people are emotionally connected to the place. What the main purpose of this study was like considering the current development of the street view images, could we use them as a source to explain how human understand POIs and their neighborhoods. There have been loads of studies in the current state of the art. Many researchers were trying to understand cities by classifying land into different categories. For example, there were many studies trying to classify cities as residential area, industrial one, and so on. And these images are high quality, and you can understand the functionality of the city in this way of categorization. But when it comes to the POI itself, imagine a dense city with so many POI inside one building, one big building with multiple POIs. So top level images are not that accurate to realize the functionality of the POIs. So that was the reason street view images from ground level become more popular. It started with the Google Street View images, and then other companies started to investing on them. There have been a huge data set that try to introduce different street signs such as street stops, pavements as a general data set to help us to better understand our cities. The main gap that we realized in this study was like we don't have any specific data set that could relate any of these street object to specific POIs. For example, saying these types of pavements exist around these specific restaurants in cities. So this was the gap that we define our objectives based on that. This study followed two main objectives. First, we introduced a novel approach for matching crowdsourced street-level images with POI dataset. To make sure that our approach is working, we introduced open-source Mapillary POI-Neighborhood street-level images, MPOINSLI dataset, which contain POIs and their neighborhood street-level images for New York City, especially the Manhattan part of the New York. For achieving to this aim, first we use a POI dataset from a company called Safegraph. Safegraph is a Joe company which has several datasets. The dataset that we used in this study was a place dataset and geometry dataset. Place dataset contain many information of address-related attributes of the POIs, functionality of these POIs, the categories, and the coordinates of the POIs. One good thing about Safegraph is that they have already classified these POIs to their functionality. They have used North American industry classification system to define different functionality. For example, it has top categories, which the first two digits indicates the board category as functionality of these POIs, and it has also very detailed definition of the classification. For example, accommodation and food services is a top category, but limited services restaurant is the subcategory. So all of these POIs have a category to explain their functionality. Then second, we have used Mapillary. Mapillary is a crowdsourced street-level imagery which have been widely used during the past couple of the years. Mapillary has a main benefit comparing to to Google Street View images. First of all, is coverage. It covers street level imagery for several years, for different seasons, and also in terms of the freshness, because it's based on the contribution of the user. Everyone could easily go to the street, capture several sequence of the images and upload them, so these images and platform could be get updated much faster comparing to the Google. And more important, the dataset is free and everyone could use it, and it's completely open source. Yeah, first then here we would explain how we use these street level images to filter those images that have any part of POI facade in their field of view. The first thing was like gathering points of interest, mean point coordinates. We gathered this by the data provided by Safegraph company. Safegraph provided us with around 14,000 POI in the New York City, mainly in Manhattan part. These POIs had 137 top categories. As we were planning to share this dataset, we wanted to make sure that our dataset has a variety of the POIs. So we have removed those POIs, those top categories that has less than 100 POIs, to make sure that we have enough sample at the end. So that ended to around 11,000 unique POIs with 23 top categories and 67 subcategories that we started gathering Mapillary Street View images for them. For gathering Mapillary Street View images, they have recently published this SDK, which give you different interface. For example, you can gather all the images for a specific bounding box of the city. But what we have used, what this get close to functionality, because we had the coordinate of the POIs and there was no point of gathering all the images in Manhattan. So we define a radius of 35 meters around each POI and we gather all the images. And the dataset is gathered from the data from January 2016 till November 2022. And after getting this image sequence ID, we also gather all camera specification like the height and width, the sequence ID, the compass angle, the different camera parameters. So later others could also use this specific metadata. Then we wanted to see if any images exist around the POI. If there was no contribution around the specific POI, we removed that record from our dataset. Otherwise, we calculated the field of view. For calculating this, we multiply, because we had the focal length based on the pixel, we calculated by the maximum of the height and width to make sure that we would all of our meters are unified. And then we wanted to see if a specific camera is looking at a specific POI we are looking at. As you know, we can be near to the building that we are trying to capture the street view images, but there is no guarantee that a specific camera would look at the building. So we were looking for some algorithm to make sure that if these two are looking at each other. So what we did, we calculated the triangular of the camera field of view, and we used the same formula provided by the paper that I put the reference here. So they were trying to monitor the crop different lengths, so we adapted a formula to our case of a study to create our triangular to see later if these building polygon are intersecting with camera field of view. To make it more clear, I can show you some sample here. Here, for example, imagine this is the building that we are trying to see if these images are looking at them. So we made this triangular and we have the polygon of the buildings as well. But because there is no intersection between the camera field of view and also the building, we discarded these kind of images from our data set, but we considered those which has at least one types of intersection. That resulted in the datasets that we introduced as part of this research. This dataset has like 7,000 unique POIs almost, and 17,000 images. Around these 17,000, about 15,000 of them are the unique. As you know, in a street view images, we may have several POIs which are very close to each other. So one image can explain 2 or 3 POIs at the same time. And most of the images, almost 30%, 33% are belong to restaurants and other eating places, and around 18% belongs to museum, historical site, and similar location. So we try to gather a variety of the categories, but in a city, some categories we have more restaurants comparing to other POI. Here you can see some sample of our data set. As you can see, you can see any part of the POI. So this data set is really working good for neighborhood analytic. Here you can see a grocery store, you can see a financial or like jewelry stores and different type of POIs. Here we also try to consider metadata for the image dataset that we introduced. Mapillary provided us with a very full dataset, so we gather all the specifications. For example, here all of these images are looking at a specific Chinese restaurants in Manhattan. As you can see, we have different type of metadata that differentiate these images from each other: the angle of the camera, the quality. For example, as you can see, the quality score of this image is like 0.31. It's a bit blurred image comparing to ones like has 0.7 accuracy. So yeah, these metadata could later help others that they're gonna work with high quality images or specific time period, someone who was interested to capture the changes in the locations. So as you can see here, the polygon shows the polygon footprint of the POIs. It's the building footprint, and here is the midpoint. As you can see, most of our data set is concentrated in the Manhattan part of the New York City. And also we were interested to see where the camera should be placed to have any portion of the POI facade in their field of view. For some categories like museum and historical places, and also schools and university, this value was around 80 meters, but for some categories like restaurants, 50 meters was the average, the good distance that our camera would capture any portion of the POIs in the field of the view. So this study, like many other studies, have their own limitation. At the same time, this limitation provided us with some opportunities. First of all, because this data set is based on crowdsourced and volunteer-based contribution of the people, someone if is interested in classifying POIs based on this data set, they may try to extend the same approach to several datasets, because it's only considered Manhattan part of the New York City. So for some buildings, we have several contributions from different angle of the POIs, but at the same time, for some part, we don't have enough contribution. So it would be nice if someone gather and extend the same approach to other cities, so they have a huge data set of and a different angle of the POIs. But at the same time, this provides us with the unique opportunities. All of these POIs has a very good range of the neighborhood of the POI, so you can easily detect pavement and curb, accessibility and walkability, and also the greenery of the area. Most of the current study, they for example introduce different pavements, they assess their qualities, but with the current data set we know and we can differentiate the curbs exist near a restaurant than a curbs exist for example near a hospital, which is very important for urban planners. To conclude this talk, I would say we have introduced MPOINSLI dataset, which has been created through the combination of the Safegraph and Mapillary dataset. The approach could be extended to any other POI dataset like OSM or any governmental related one. We have included all Mapillary metadata, and we have removed all Safegraph dataset, because if someone wants to use them, they can contact with the company and buy the dataset from them, or if they are researchers, they can easily, they are sharing their dataset with the researchers. At the end, our dataset contain about around 17,000 unique images, which around 15,000 of them are unique for 23 top category and 67 subcategories, which cover around 7,000 POIs in the city. Yeah, thank you so much. After this presentation, we would share this data set with public, and also we are going to share the codes so that others could also use this data set or for their cities, so they can have their own street level images for the POIs. Thank you if you have any questions.